Okay, let's kick it off. Hi, everyone. For those who attended last month's webinar, welcome back. For everyone else, welcome to our monthly webinar series. Our goal here is to help educate the industry on AI models, on GEO, and how brands and retailers are really evolving with AI search. So today we are going to be focusing on how LLMs work. We've tried to distill a very complex topic into digestible pieces so that you can better understand the fundamentals of large language models and what that means for your brand. So my name is Madison Brisseaux, and I lead product marketing at Evertune. I'm joined by Daniel DeGruma, one of our incredible software engineers who has what he refers to as a love-hate relationship with his robots. I brought Daniel here today because he's really one of the best at breaking down complex concepts into something that we can all understand.
Hello, everyone.
So we've got a lot to pack in 30 minutes today. So first, we're going to discuss how AI search differs from traditional search. Then we'll get into why LLMs are probabilistic and what that means. It's really crucial to understand this nuance before diving into then how LLMs work and how they learn. And then we'll wrap up by talking about what this means for your brand and for your AI visibility. So the Q&A is open, so we welcome any questions throughout this conversation. I already see that someone has already asked whether GEO and SEO is the same, and I'm so glad you asked that because we will dive into that. Not necessarily the optimization part, but we will talk about what traditional search versus AI search looks like. Inherently, there are some differences in the way that you would optimize because they are inherently a little bit different. And so we'll try to answer your Q&As either in the chat or we'll try to answer them live as we're going through. If we have some time at the end, we might even dive into additional Q&As as well. So let's get started. Sorry, one sec. So if you joined us for the last webinar, we talked about how AI search is condensing the traditional marketing funnel. So we used to think of the funnel as awareness, consideration, and purchase. So a process that, depending on the product or service, could really take several weeks, even months. And now with AI search, buyers are going from discovery to purchase within a conversation. It's a single conversation. It could be one prompt, it could be a several prompts, but it might not even be more than a few minutes where a buyer goes from what are the best portable speakers, what are the best wireless headphones, to AI searches already giving them an answer and a link to purchase. And so the shift is really happening because of large language models. So, what is a large language model, also known as an LLM? It is an artificial intelligence system that's trained on massive amounts of information to understand and generate human-like language. So, before we get into how they work, let's first take a look at how they differ from traditional search. So, think of traditional search like a librarian pointing you to a shelf of books. So when you type in something into Google, the search engine scans web pages for matching keywords and returns a ranked list of links. In the same way, if you ask a librarian a question, the librarian has a sense of what you're looking for, and they'll point you in the direction of what might help you find the answer. But ultimately, you have to go read the book for yourself and find the answer yourself. With AI search, it's almost as if the librarian has read every book in the library, memorized the content, and synthesized it all into a direct answer to your question. So they might still point you to a few source materials so you can fact check the librarian by reading the book, or you can just keep the conversation going and get everything you need without ever opening the book, simply just by having that ongoing conversation and dialogue with the librarian. And we all think of librarians as very trustworthy, authoritative people. And so this is similar to how you might engage with AI search. So if we take that analogy a little step further, think of each AI model maker like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini as different librarians working at different libraries. So many of the books at different libraries are overlapping, but each librarian has slightly different perspectives, might have a personal preference for one book or the other. And that even can change day by day within the librarian's response, right? One day a librarian might respond in a way that's slightly different than the next day. And so, one important concept to really understand about AI search is that LLMs are not keyword matching machines. So, they don't just find pages the way that traditional search does. They understand meaning, they interpret context, and they generate original responses. So, these are things that traditional search simply cannot do. And this is easy to see when you are actually using traditional search versus ChatGPT, as I'm sure we all have done before. So, traditional search, you ask what are the best portable speakers. It'll return a list of options and leave the decision to you to click to learn more, to click to purchase. You really have to start doing the digging on your own. Whereas AI search generates that direct answer based off of what it thinks you're looking for. And it's often provided in a very confident and authoritative tone, which can honestly have quite an outsized impact on how trustworthy a user feels their AI recommendation is. So let's dive a little bit more technical into how LLMs work and how they learn. So, Daniel, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Madison. Okay, so LLMs are able to generate answers because they are probabilistic systems that predict language based on patterns. As Madison said, they're not keyword matching machines. So what does that mean in practice? Instead of following rigid rules or matching exact keywords, an LLM predicts what word should come next based on patterns learned from billions of examples. So because LLMs are prediction machines, if you happen to say you did a very, the LLM will try to predict the next best word. It might cycle through a few adjectives such as good, bad, wild, terrible, awful, nice. You get the idea, but eventually land on good as the best option for human preference based on the next word or for the next word. Now, the models considered all of these words. It just assigned the highest probability to good given that specific content. It may have chosen another word from that list, but it just rolled the dice, and more often than not, it's going to come up with good. But another one might show up in another instance. So when you ask an LLM, what are the best portable speakers? It's not searching a database for entries tagged portable and speakers. Instead, it's calculating based on everything it's learned about portable speakers, electronics, and how people talk about sound quality, battery life, durability to determine the most helpful response it can generate. So this is why the same prompt can generate different responses across different AI models and even within the same AI model. Because LLMs are predicting from probabilities rather than retrieving fixed answers, every response is going to be a little bit different. Even if you ask the exact same question twice, the model samples from its learned patterns and might emphasize different aspects, structure their answer differently, or mention different examples, all of which are equally valid. For example, last week I asked ChatGPT what the best portable speakers were, and it suggested the JBL Charge 6. I opened an incognito browser, asked the exact same question a minute later, and it recommended the Bose SoundLink Max. So I like asking two electronics experts the same question. They've read the same industry reports, tried the same models, but expert A might prioritize battery life and lean towards JBL, while expert B prioritizes durability and goes with Bose. Same knowledge base, but different but equally valid answers. The same dynamic plays out across models. ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini have all been trained on similar content from the internet, but each company made different choices about what data to include, how to weight certain sources, and what makes a good answer. They develop different patterns from different expertise. This is why you can't optimize for one perfect prompt or one specific AI. Your brand needs to show up consistently across thousands of different contexts and variations. So we tested this ourselves. We ran the prompt, what are the best portable speakers, 100 times in ChatGPT. If you looked at only the first result, you'd see Bose, JBL, Ultimate Ears, Anker, and Sony. At 10 samples, Sonos, Bang& Olufsen, Marshall, and Apple start appearing. At 100 samples, you'd also see Klipsch, Tribe, Harman Kardon, and Iomis. So if you're only sampling ChatGPT once, it's like being in the streets of New York and asking a single New Yorker what's the best portable speakers. But if you want to have a more representative sample of what New Yorkers think are the best portable speakers, you're going to ask more than one person. So go ahead, Madison.
No, it's okay. I was going to read something in a chat, but I think I'm going to save this. A great question. I will save that for the end.
Very good. Okay, so most GEO platforms are sampling each prompt just once per model per day. Now, with that approach, you'd never know that Bang& Olufsen show up at all. But when you sample that question 100 times, as Evertune does, you discover that Bang& Olufsen is recommended 38% of the time. And that's why we sample each prompt up to 100 times to generate statistically significant insights.
Yeah, so I see a question in the chat about platforms that sample just once a day versus sampling more frequently. So yeah, if you're using a platform that's sampling just once a day, you're not going to get that statistical significance. And so you really want to make sure that you're having a representative understanding of how the LLMs are approaching and responding to prompts related to your brand, related to your category. Is to make sure that your optimizations are therefore based off of statistically sound data.
Exactly. Okay. If you'll indulge me in another tortured metaphor, think of how LLM learns as three distinct phases. So, phase one is pre-training. And this is where the model is trained to predict the next word in a sentence using massive text sources, including publicly available internet content. Think of it like studying pre-med, reading every textbook, being an A+ student, absorbing everything in class. Phase two is post-training. So once the core language capabilities are established, the model is fine-tuned to understand what a good answer looks like. Responses that are more relevant, accurate, and helpful. And this is the equivalent of, say, med school. So honing all of their raw knowledge, getting feedback from teachers and mentors, and continuing to refine. At the end of phase two training, the model is going to either graduate or not graduate. And if it has graduated, at that point, its learning is frozen. So its model is frozen in time, and everything it has learned at that point is embedded in the model. Phase three is reasoning and tools. So no matter how much the LLM has learned during training, there will always be gaps in its knowledge. And new information is always coming out that's been created after the model was generated. So this is where reasoning capabilities and tools come in. So think of this as the LLM's first job at a teaching hospital. They bring a wealth of knowledge, but they're now in the real world and they can tap into additional inputs. So a doctor might consult a colleague or order an MRI or blood work. So an LLM can use tools like retrieval augmented generation or RAG, or to search the web and fill in its gaps. So pre-training and post-training form the foundational knowledge layer, whereas the reasoning and tools are the agentic layer.
And Daniel, I just want to add something here is that sometimes oftentimes there's a misconception that like agentic AI simply just means when an AI model is purchasing a product for you or taking like a true action in the purchase journey for you. And really just what it means is that the AI is using its reasoning and tools to better generate an answer.
I think that's absolutely right. That's right. What is an agentic agent it spans out a large class of say applications. But yes, they're all built on top of that foundational model. Okay, so what does this mean for your brand? What a model says about you depends a lot on what it's learned during training, that is like the pre-med and med school, what it learned during live search. And this is where great SEO does come into play. So that's like working in the hospital. Credible sources that are optimized for AI retrieval. It will trust the attendee for medical advice over an IT technician or the hospital janitor. Um, so, how clearly your content communicates your differentiators. If the nurse explained it better than the attendee, it might use the nurse's suggestion. How consistently your brand appears in authoritative texts. So, Is the nurse, the attendee, the test results, and your intuition all suggesting the same diagnosis or treatment?
So let's dive into how this actually plays out in the real world. So we talked about the third phase of an LLM's development. It involves using those reasoning and tools. So that's what we call agentic AI. And so the process simply works of when a user submits a prompt, the LLM receives that user prompt. The LLM reasons through the question, and so it thinks to itself, would a live search produce a better answer? Like, do I have enough information? Would a live search make this a better answer? If it thinks, I have enough information to appropriately and accurately generate a response, then it will generate a response just using its foundational knowledge from that pre-training med school and pre-med days. If it does think that a live search would produce a better answer, then it will run multiple queries in a search index and retrieve relevant content from websites. It will then reason through what it found and think to itself, how does this new information change or even reaffirm what my answer was going to be based off of my foundational knowledge? So it's really kind of taking the foundational knowledge and saying, what does this new information do or change or reaffirm about what I was going to say? It then generates an answer and response drawing on both what it already knew and what it found during retrieval. And then lastly, it will produce a list of sources that it visited through the live search. Now, it's important to note that when an LLM is going beyond its foundational knowledge, it will oftentimes like say searching the web for, like, so you might see if you type in a prompt and it'll say like searching the web for, that means that it's running this retrieval process to try to find new information in the web on for updated information to augment its foundational knowledge. If it's not saying that, if you type in a prompt and it's not saying searching the web for, then it likely means that it's just providing information based off of what it knew in its foundational knowledge. And so when an AI model cites sources, it's only going to do so when it ran that live search. It's not going to provide sources if it's answering solely just based off of its foundational knowledge. And so this is a really important distinction to understand because a lot of AI visibility platforms out there are simply just tracking when a AI model is running either the live search or answering from its foundational knowledge, but not separating out the two. In Evertune, we track both. And so we're really able to help you understand the difference between what the AI fundamentally knows about you and what the AI recommends about you or products or your categories when it runs that live search. So when an AI model retrieves that information before generating a response, it's making a judgment about which sources are authoritative enough to inform its answer. So it's likely visiting hundreds of websites and then deciding, okay, these are the ones that I want to actually visit, these are the ones I want to crawl, and these are the ones that I want to cite as sources to my answer. And so these sources really shape what the model says about your category, your competitors, and your brand. And sometimes those sources look like authoritative sites that you'd expect from a highly intelligent robot to get its information from. But other times the sources that LLM cite are kind of seemingly random sites. So, for example, this is real data we ran in our platform. What are the best portable speakers? And you'll see some of the top sources are like Mashable and Forbes. Those are like well-respected, authoritative sites. But then one of the sites that came through as one of the top sources was Autofile On. It's kind of some random blog. I searched up what the domain traffic was. It's pretty low domain traffic when it comes to like tech and electronics. So I dove deeper. Why did the model trust this as an authoritative source? If you go into the actual page, it's um, really highly curated to AI visibility. So it has a bulleted list of features for each product. It has an image of each product. It has a brief description. It has links to purchase. There's a whole FAQ section at the bottom that's structured in a way that a user prompt might ask of, say, what are the best sounding Bluetooth speakers? What are the most durable Bluetooth speakers? Which Bluetooth speaker has the best battery life? And so it's really interesting to dive deeper into some of the content that AI is citing as sources, because you'll start to see where you can start to generate content that is optimized for AI visibility. So, what does this mean for your brand? So you really need to start sampling prompt responses for statistical significance. So, if you're making decisions based off of that one time that you saw a competitor recommend you over chat, over your a competitor recommended over you in ChatGPT, you're not really understanding that full picture of AI visibility. Secondly, it's important to understand what AI already knows about you fundamentally through its foundational knowledge, also known as like its pre-training data. So this is a really crucial step in understanding how you'll be represented in AI search. And we're one of the only platforms that actually isolated out how a brand is represented in AI search when an LLM exclusively uses its foundational knowledge to respond. And lastly, it's important to really start to find the sources shaping AI's narrative about your brand and about your category. So you really need to understand where that mention came from and whether that source is portraying you accurately so that you can try to get mentioned on those sources through either affiliate partnerships or build content optimized for AI. So this is why we built Partner Connect. It really helps to identify the top affiliate URLs that AI is citing, but your brand isn't mentioned, to really connect you to those affiliate partners to get you mentioned. And then generate content to try to get mentioned on some of these top sources and create content for AI visibility to have your brand mentioned on top sources. So let's close with some key takeaways. Foundational knowledge is really frozen at that training cutoff. We could have a whole nother training on all of the AI models and their last training cutoff periods and why they do that and how models update. But it's important to understand that a model really can't learn new information after its training period unless it pulls and retrieves information through that live search. So this is similar to kind of, a doctor that graduated med school but never practiced medicine or stayed up to date on research has a cutoff knowledge of when it graduated med school.
Mhm.
Secondly, that LLMs are probabilistic by design. It's not a bug, it is a feature. This is how they operate. So they generate responses based on probability distributions, which makes each unique response unique by model and even within the model. Next, it's really important to understand that statistical significance requires those multiple samples. So because the LLMs are probabilistic, a few data points won't really tell the full picture. In the same way that a great doctor isn't making decisions based off of one single data point, they factor in test results, colleague input, patient history, and their own training and understanding. And these models all have different biases. So in the same way that like two doctors trained at different schools under different mentors with different patient populations might have the same diagnosis that they come to a patient with, but slightly different treatment plans. And so different LLM providers were really trained on overlapping but somewhat different data sets. And so cross-model consistency is never guaranteed. And so what that means for your brand really is that you have to be tracking your AI visibility across all the different models. But then also there's not really a one-size-fits-all approach to optimization. That's why it's really important to be able to track AI visibility across all the models, but then really get the actionable insights across each model. That is it from our end. I'm going to double check to see if there are any questions in the
There are some
Q&A.
questions. Yes,
Yes.
there are.
Akash, I see. Great question. How can I see if AI likes my website? Um, that's a fantastic question. There are tools out there. Evertune has one. We call it site audit, which essentially scans your entire website to be able to understand how your website is structured, how each page of your website is structured, and if it's optimized for AI visibility. So everything from the schema to the heading hierarchy to the way that your JSON structured to be able to see whether you're even accepting and allowing bots to crawl your website. So there's a tool that really can help you understand, is your AI is your website optimized for AI visibility before you even get into the actual content of your website? I see another question. How is the foundational knowledge of a brand created? That's a great question.
Yeah.
So, Daniel, do you want to dive into
No, yeah,
that?
I'll try to be succinct as I possibly can. I have a tendency not to be succinct. Um, when the model, as we talk through, when it's going through, it's uh, the phase one. It's not in med school. It's in pre-med. Uh, think of it, anything that has been published up to that point, it can and will include into its foundational training. But once that first phase and any sort of additional sort of pre-med or second phase has completed, then at that point it's snapshotted in. Now, every model provider is going to use or curate different sources. It'll tend to curate as much as it possibly can, but it's really about if the content is published at that point, and we actually observe this when new models are released, and we are tracking both the foundational model, what it's responding with, and then also augmented responses with search. We can see when a new model is released that it actually is including more recent content that's available on the internet. So hopefully that answers the question about your brand will exist or is most or more likely to exist based on whatever new content exists when that model was generated.
Great question. One of the questions was how whether you can measure how frequently an LLM relies on its foundational knowledge versus real life search. And there's no real way that you can actually identify it. We've done our own insights and research, and it can be sometimes higher than 50% where the AI model is relying exclusively on its foundational model knowledge. But it really also does depend on the prompt, right? If you're asking, like, where's the cheapest place that I can buy portable speakers today? It's prompting the LLM to have a very real-time search of, like, you're asking it today, you're asking where you want to buy it. Those are triggers often that would tell the LLM, I need to run a live search today. Whereas if you're simply asking, uh, what are the best brands for portable speakers, it might already have a bias towards Bose over JBL. So it also kind of just depends on the prompt that you're asking.
Yeah, exactly.
We probably have time for one more question if anyone has. Okay, I just see one more. Let me just take a look. Um, So we recently updated our URL structure for blogs. Search Console has shown a decrease in impressions and SEMrush has shown some keyword loss. I knew it was going to dip for a few weeks. Does this apply to AI and LLMs as well since we restructured? Yeah, so you'll oftentimes see, and this kind of relates to the first question of is SEO and GEO the same? You'll tend to see that if your SEO is tanking, that your AI search, when an AI model is running that live retrieval, will probably dip as well too, because it's still running that Google search. So that's where SEO and GEO are very much like interconnected. They're different. There's different optimizations for each. We can do a whole nother session on that. We probably will. But you'll typically see there can be some trend lines in similar SEO visibility or SEO performance with your own AI visibility performance as well.
Yeah.
With that, I really thank everyone for attending. This was so fun. We will be doing this again next month. If you have any topics that you'd love to hear from us, please let us know. We are all ears as we start to do these monthly. And thank you so much. We will send out the recording. We'll send out the deck that you can pass along to any of your colleagues as well. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, everyone.